In this video, we are going to learn the first two stanzas of the poem Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. All of you take your book and turn to page number 25. Matthew Arnold was born in 1822 and died in 1888. He was an English poet and cultural critic, whose work remains amongst the best known of 19th century English poetry. He wrote on a variety of subjects but is best known for his poems on nature, modern society, and moral instruction. Arnold is sometimes called the third great Victorian poet. The Victorian era is from 1837 to 1901. Arnold is sometimes called the third great Victorian poet, along with Alfred Lord Tennyson and Robert Browning. Arnold was keenly aware of his place in poetry. In an 1869 letter to his mother, he wrote, "It might be fairly urged that I have less poetical sentiment. Poetical sentiment refers to the reaction of the poetry or poetic spirit to true poetry than Tennyson, and less intellectual vigor and abundance than Browning. Yet, because I have perhaps more of a fusion of the two than either of them, and have more regularly applied that fusion to the main line of modern development, I am likely enough to have my turn as they have had theirs." So Arnold very well knew that he had both poetic sentiment and intellectual vigor, poetical sentiment of Tennyson and the intellectual vigor and abundance that Browning had. He had a fusion of these two things. So he was sure to have his own place in his time. Sir Edmund Chambers, who is a literary critic, judged Arnold's poetic vision by its simplicity, lucidity, that is, clarity of expression, and straightforwardness. Its literalness means the literal meaning of a word, the sparing use of aureate words, that is, ornamental words, or far fetched, unlikely words, which are all the more effective when they come, the avoidance of inversions, that is, reversals, and the general directness of syntax. Syntax is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well formed sentences in language, which gives full value to the delicacies of a varied rhythm and makes it, of all verse that I know, the easiest to read aloud. The poem Dover Beach, written in 1867, is a dramatic monologue. A monologue is a speech of an individual character and presents the ephemeral human feeling. So the poem Dover Beach presents the ephemeral means temporal human feeling of sadness through the image of the sea. The poet expresses his view that the despair means absence of hope, hopelessness and frustration in the world is due to the decline of religious faith. The poem is marked by an elegiac tone. Elegiac means a mournful tone. An elegy is a poem of serious reflection, typically a lament for the dead. So this poem is in the elegiac tone, which means it is in a mournful tone. Okay, the poet through this poem expresses his view that the despair, hopelessness, and frustration in the world is due to the decline of religious faith. Please underline that line. Okay, so in this poem, the poet talks about the effect science has had on religion. Long before the poem's publication, Charles Darwin published his On the Origin of Species. Okay, so what happened? He propagated the theory of evolution. People started believing in science. Okay, so as soon as this theory was known by the people became very confused. And many people lost their hope in religion and science. They lost their hope in God and they started believing in Science. Okay, so the poet, that is Matthew Arnold, laments that. He says that the hopelessness and the frustration prevailing in the world is due to the decline of religious faith. Okay, let's see the first stanza of the poem now. Dover Beach. See, Dover Beach is an English ferry port in Kent, facing Calais in France. Okay, and Calais is 21 miles away from the Dover Beach. Arnold went to Dover Beach in 1851. In the first stanza of the poem, he gazes or he brings out a naturalistic scene. He gazes at the majesty of nature. Let's learn the first stanza. The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits. Straits is a narrow passage of water connecting two seas. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. So, where is he? He is in the Dover beach and he is standing near the window and he is looking at the French coast. French coast is only 21 miles away, right? So, from here, he can see that. So, what are the things he observes? He observes the sea. The sea is calm. The tide is full. So, on that day, it was high tide. The moon lies fair upon the straits. So, on the narrow passage of water, he could see the moonlight, or the image of the moon is reflected on the water. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. On the French coast, he sees a light gleaming and suddenly the light disappears. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast. Cliffs is a steep rock face, especially at the edge of the sea. So he sees the cliffs, the majestic cliffs of England, and a weak light shines on them, and out in the tranquil bay, come to the window. So he sees a weak light on the cliffs of England. Okay, the steep rock face reflects a weak light. Out in the tranquil bay, bay is the inlet of sea where the land curves inward. Tranquil means calm. So the sea is calm, the tide is full, the light of the moon is reflected on the water. On the other side, the poet can see the light gleaming on the French coast, and the light gleams and goes off, and the bay is calm. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. So he is asking his wife to come to the window because the atmosphere is very pleasant. Sweet is the night air means the atmosphere is pleasant. So I'm just telling you the literal meaning. Okay, I have told you the literal meaning of all these words. Now let's have a look at the inner meaning of these lines. Okay, the poet tells that the sea is calm, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the streets and all, and on the French coast, the light here refers to the light of faith in God and religion. Okay, so in on the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. What is the meaning of this? The poet says that the light of faith in God and religion, which was once strong, is gone or is fading. So people had strong faith in God. But after the theory of evolution, they started believing in science. Okay, he is talking about the Christian faith. People had faith on religion means they believed that God created everybody. God created the first man and woman in his own image. It was God who created. But the theory of evolution brought forth a different thing, isn't it? You all know about it. So there was a clash between science and religion. People started believing what Charles Darwin said, and they lost their faith in God and religion. That's why he says that on the French coast, the light of faith in God and religion, which was once strong, is fading. Okay? And now he urges his wife to come and see the scene. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray, where the sea meets the moon blanched land, listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling as they return up the high strand. So the poet is asking his wife to come near the window and see the pleasant atmosphere. And he says, from the long line of spray refers to the white foam produced by large waves where the sea meets the moon blanched land. He's talking about the seashore here. The big waves hit the shore, isn't it? And on the seashore, you can listen the grating roar. Grating refers to unpleasant, harsh sound produced by the pebbles when they brush against each other. So you listen, you can hear the grating roar of pebbles when the waves throw back, draw back, and fling. Fling means throw. So when the waves hit the shore, it throws back the pebbles, and the pebbles brush against each other and they create a grating roar. The poet is asking his wife, who is a passive listener, to listen to the grating roar of pebbles. Let me read this once again. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow and bring the eternal note of sadness. So the he is talking about the endless motion of waves at their return refers to the waves. Okay, so when the waves come, they throw back the pebbles and the pebbles brush against each other and create a very unpleasant sound. Okay, and the it keeps on coming, right? Waves don't stop. So he is asking, or he is talking about the endless motion of waves. They begin and cease and then again begin with tremulous cadence. Tremulous means shaking slightly. Cadence is a modulation of the voice. So we all know how the waves sound, isn't it? So he is talking about that. And the sound of the waves bring the eternal note of sadness in. Okay, so they bring about the eternal note of sadness. Now, coming to the inner meaning of these lines. See, in these lines, the poet brings out auditory imagery. Okay, so the poet says that the minds of the people are like naked pebbles. There is restlessness in their minds. There is no peace at their heart. Do you understand, students? So the grating roar refers to the restlessness which is prevailing in the minds of the people due to the lack of faith in God and religion. So men's mind are like naked pebbles. Okay? So they are restless Initially, they felt so secure. They felt that they were in the hands of God, but now they come to a conclusion that God does not exist. They started believing science, they started believing in the theory of evolution, so their minds have become like naked pebbles. They are restless now. Okay. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid means muddy, ebb and flow of human misery. So, to enhance the sense of melancholy and sorrow, Matthew Arnold alludes to Sophocles here. Who is Sophocles? He is one of the three ancient Greek tragedians. Okay, he is a great tragedian, and he wrote the Oedipus Rex. Okay, which is a very famous tragedy. So Arnold says that Sophocles would have also heard the same eternal note of sadness on the Aegean, which would have made him to write tragedies. You know the meaning of tragedy, isn't it? Yes. So Aegean is located between the mainlands of Greece and Turkey. So Aegean Sea. So Sophocles would have also heard the same note of sadness on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. So the sound would have reminded him of the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We also, in the sound, a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. So the poet says that we also find the same or hear the same eternal note of sadness in the distant northern sea. Okay, the turbid ebb and flow here refers to the collapsing spiritual and religious faith. Okay. Is it clear, students? The turbid ebb and flow refers to the collapsing spiritual and religious faith. And in the previous stanza, we find that, see, the waves begin and cease and then again begin with tremulous cadence slow and bring the eternal note of sadness in. This is a pathetic fallacy because the eternal note of sadness is experienced by people and not the pebbles. Why are the people experiencing that? Because their minds have become like the naked pebbles, because they have lost their hope in religion and God. Is it clear, students? So, the loss of faith in God and religion has brought an eternal note of sadness in their mind. And in the second stanza, the poet says that Sophocles would have also heard the same human or same sound which brought into his mind the ebb and flow of human misery. That's why he was able to write such tragic dramas. Is it clear? So, in the first two stanzas, we find the poet talking about the collapsing spiritual and religious faith. He gives different imagery, and in the first stanza, he describes a naturalistic scene. Okay, so that's all for today's class, students. Let's continue the poem in the next video. Thank you, students.